Thank you. This is the Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs for Friday, May 7th, 2021. I understand that state law currently requires that the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of City Council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come, and will the clerk please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image may be displayed on screen when you speak. Thank you. Madam Chair, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Gautier.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and colleagues present.
Good afternoon.
Councilmember Quinones Sanchez. Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Thomas.
Good afternoon, I'm present.
Councilmember Jones. Councilmember Brooks.
Present.
And Chair Bass.
I am present. Thank you. A quorum of the committee is present, and this hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing of the Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs regarding Bill number 210360 and Resolution number 210308. Madam Clerk, will you please read the title of the bill and the resolution?
Bill number 210360, a bill officially naming and designating the dog park located on the north side of Winter Street between 21st Street and 22nd Street in the city of Philadelphia as the Rob Stuart Memorial Dog Park, and resolution number 210308, a resolution authorizing the Committee of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs to hold hearings on the City of Philadelphia's landmarks and monuments review process to propose changes to any landmarks or monuments in Philadelphia that are reminders or symbols of racism or bigotry while elevating the city's rich history and diversity.
Thank you. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have for today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for the questions or comments they have for witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will be using the chat feature available in Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purpose. Before I call on the clerk to begin the first panel, would any one of my colleagues like to make opening comments? Okay, and if we could have the clerk call the panels and witnesses on bill number 210360.
For panel 1, Aparna Palantino, Deputy Commissioner for Capital Infrastructure and Natural Lands Management of the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Thank you. Ms. Palantino, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Aparna Palantino, Deputy Commissioner of Parks and Recreation. Good afternoon, Chairperson Bass and members of the Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs. My name is Aparna Palantino, and I serve as the Deputy Commissioner for Infrastructure and Land Management for the Department of Parks and Recreation. I'm here today to testify in support of Bill number 210360, an ordinance officially naming and designating the dog park located on the north side of Winter Street between 21st Street and 22nd Street as the Rob Stuart Memorial Dog Park. Robert Andrew Stewart, known to all as Rob, was president of the Logan Square Neighborhood Association from 2006 to 2009. Rob lobbied City Council for a variety of civic causes, such as bringing bicycle cabs to the city, broader public access to the Schuylkill River Trail via CSX crossings at Race and Locust Streets, and illegal gun bans, to name only a few. Rob was a tireless advocate for both his Logan Square neighborhood and the city as a whole. He was positively described as the 18th member of City Council, an idea merchant, and a tireless and optimistic social entrepreneur who rallied people to a cause using persistent and collective outreach efforts. These efforts were captured in a documentary on the Schuylkill River Trail titled Free the River Park that presents Rob's successful 4-year effort to allow the public CSX crossings. Rob sincerely hoped that other community and civic groups could use the documentary as a teaching tool going forward. Rob Stewart passed much too young of a fatal heart attack in October 2011 at the age of 49, leaving his wife Sarah and 2 daughters, Marina and Amelia, as well as a legacy of progressive causes and accomplishments. The Department of Parks and Recreation supports this ordinance, and I respectfully request that this committee approve Bill number 210360. I'm also requesting a suspension of the rules to allow for a first hearing at the next scheduled session of City Council. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your testimony. I knew Rob Stewart, as so many of us, as mentioned, he was the 18th member of Philadelphia City Council. He was a great guy, and this is a wonderful tribute to him, and I'm honored to support it. So thank you so much for your testimony today. Are there any other comments from members of council for this witness? No? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. If we can now have the clerk call the next panel forward.
Dennis Boylan and Sam Little.
Okay, do we have Dennis or Sam available? Dennis?
Modesto, I think they have to be called in.
Okay. Modesto, do we need to pause for us to reach the second panel?
This is Dennis Boylan.
Oh, hi, Dennis. How are you? Thank you for being here.
I'm great. Thank you. Hang on. Let me mute the television.
Okay. All right. Let's mute the TV. While we're waiting for the TV to be muted, I do want to recognize that Councilwoman Maria Quinones Sanchez has joined the committee. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Bass and members of City Council. Thank you very much for this opportunity to come before you today on behalf of Resolution 210360 for the naming of the it's currently still under construction, the dog park located on Winter Street between 21st and 22nd in honor of the late Rob Stewart. I'm Dennis Boylan. I'm the current president of the Logan Square Neighborhood Association. This fall will mark the 10 years since the passing of Rob Stewart, and as just referenced, he was the 18th member of City Council, as noted by Councilman Curtis Jones. Rob's presence in the halls of the council was not occasional. He was constantly there, and that purpose was for his advocacy of many issues on behalf of the residents and the city of Philadelphia at a much larger level. One of the great lasting efforts that Rob championed was the development of the Schuylkill River Trail and the park. And it's over time that you can see how that's expanded and connected our city in a variety of directions. Just look at the bridge that's now going to cross over the Schuylkill and connect Southwest Philadelphia back into Center City. And it's a vital means of not just transportation, but connectivity for all of us. And that's to Rob's great credit. This advocacy came with a vision, and more importantly, Rob was someone who could get things done. And he did many, many other things for our city. He was a passionate environmentalist, and he took that advocacy into the educational mode. Referenced in his obituary was a time when he made sure the Audubon Society brought small animals to the Strawberry Mansion Festival, much to the delight of small children. And that's planting a seed with kids that you never know where that's going to go, that one day one of those children, that was what sparked his interest in the environment and caring for Philadelphia. So that speaks highly of Rob. there are also some other tough issues he took on. Illegal gun trafficking. Think of how far-sighted that was in what he was doing many years ago and how that impacts us today. And then to a lesser degree, even things like getting legislation changed for pedicabs. Rob loved this city and he loved the people in it. He was very much a neighborhood guy. He loved our neighborhood, Logan Square. He served as a past president of Logan Square Neighborhood Association, and he's much loved and greatly missed by his near neighbors. Rob also loved dogs. So on behalf of the Logan Square Neighborhood Association, our residents, our members, we ask that this dog park be named in his honor as the Rob Stuart Memorial Dog Park. Thank you very much, and we appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Boylan, for all of your advocacy on behalf of this effort, and we thank you for your service to the community as well. I can hear in your voice and from your words how much you two had the great honor of knowing Rob and the impact that he had on your life and those around you as well. So we're honored to have you here today for this effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we have Mr. Little, Sam Little, if he is available?
Can you hear me on the telephone?
Certainly can. How are you today?
Good. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to testify. You will hear this repeatedly, but I was a past president of Logan Square.
Mr. Little, can you please... Mr. Little, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but first, can you state your name for the record and then proceed?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
My name is Sam R. Little, and I'm testifying in favor of Bill 210360. I've just wanted to say that I had the pleasure of knowing him, but also the pain of losing him both as a friend, a neighbor, and a civic leader. My purpose today, though, is if I could read quickly and briefly the letter that his widow, Sarah Clark Stewart, asked it could be read into the record. This is from Sarah Clark Stewart, who was not only his widow, but his partner and support in much of what he did. Dear City Council members, I regret that I am unable to attend today's hearing, testify in person about the ordinance that President Clark has introduced to name a new dog park in memory of my late husband, Rob Stewart. I'm out of town and appreciate that Sam Little will be able to read this short testimony to you on my behalf. As the ordinance lays out, Rob Stewart was an extraordinary citizen of Philadelphia. He loved our city and neighborhood deeply. From the moment we moved here in 1995 and until his untimely death in 2011, he worked on many projects, all within the aim of improving Philadelphia and ensuring its future with a high quality of life for everyone. Among his many accomplishments, he worked tirelessly to ensure that Logan Square thrived and grew, but also would retain its special character. He was particularly passionate about ensuring that Logan Square was able to attract and retain new and young families. His dream was to bring a dog park and a children's playground to our neighborhood, and he spent many years striving to find a space where dogs and children could each run around and be themselves without having to go to another neighborhood. This dog park would not have been possible without Council President Clark's leadership and support. From the bottom of my heart, I thank him for everything that he did to make this park possible. The Logan Square Neighborhood Association and several of its presidents, David Searles, Drew Murray, Sam Little, and Dennis Boylan, have provided immeasurable support and dedication to help secure critical state funding. I also want to thank the Philadelphia Parks and Recreation and the Streets Department and PennDOT for their hard work to make this new dog park a reality. Naming the dog park that is part of the Winter Street Greenway after Rob Stewart to honor his memory is one that is not only meaningful to me and his family, but to everyone who knew Rob and remembers his legacy. For that, I ask your support to pass this ordinance. Sincerely, Sarah Clark Stewart. It gives me a great honor to read that into the record, Council Chairperson.
Well, thank you. Thank you for reading it into the record. And, as his spouse and lifelong partner, we're just honored to be able to do this for her and her family, and keep Rob's name out there and alive, because so much of what he did was on behalf of the citizens of the city of Philadelphia. And so he certainly deserves this recognition. Thank you, Mr. Little, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I want to recognize Councilwoman Maria Quinones Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know that after this, we're going to have an important conversation about naming monuments after people. And so, and I also just, because of that, I wanted to add my comments and, based on my relationship with Rob and all of the advocacy that they did, naming it is important. Keeping the family engaged in that community is even more important so that people understand the work that Rob did his entire life, all of the volunteer work that he did. And so that's why these conversations are so important. You want to pay tribute to people, but you want to also remind people why those tributes are immensely important, and how they need to live on when others have passed away. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gauthier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say how moved I am by hearing the testimony. I didn't know Rob, but he sounds like just an amazing person with a wonderful legacy, and I'm appreciative of the opportunity to participate in the hearing.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Okay, I don't see anything else in the chat among members. Madam Clerk, can you please call the next panel?
This was the last panel for this bill.
Okay. Is there anyone else here to testify, to give testimony on bill number 210360? And seeing none, Madam Clerk, will you please read the title of the resolution for 210308?
A resolution authorizing the Committee of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs to hold hearings on the City of Philadelphia's landmarks and monuments review process to propose changes to any landmarks or monuments in Philadelphia that are reminders or symbols of racism or bigotry, while elevating the city's rich history and diversity.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, will you please call the first panel of witnesses? We have to testify on resolution 210308.
The first panel is Kelly Lee, Chief Cultural Officer for the City of Philadelphia and Executive Director of the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy.
Very good.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Chairperson Cindy Bass and members of the committee. I am Kelly Lee, the Chief Cultural Officer of the City of Philadelphia and a Director of the Office of Arts, Culture, and the Creative Economy. Thank you, Chairwoman Bass, for introducing resolution number 210308. I appreciate the opportunity to testify as part of this public hearing on the proposed Landmarks and Monuments Review. The killing of George Floyd almost a year ago focused discussion and reconsideration of flags, monuments, city seals, street names, and even holidays across the country. The violence and unrest that resulted at the statues of Frank Rizzo and Christopher Columbus, perceived by many as symbols of racism, was a catalyst for the development of the Landmarks and Monuments Review. This review was initiated in the summer of 2020 by the Managing Director's Office to align with the Kinney administration's Pathways to Reform, Transformation, and the Reconciliation Initiative addressing systemic and institutionalized racism in the city of Philadelphia. The Landmarks and Monuments Review will be a public-driven process to allow the review of the names of Philadelphia's landmarks, including its streets, parks, and buildings, and the monuments in the city's public spaces to ensure that we are acknowledging and celebrating our past while reflecting who we are and what we value. The intention is to allow the public to participate in the process to request the removal, renaming, or recontextualizing of any landmarks or monuments that represent a history of racism, bigotry, or colonialism. If the request is approved, the Landmarks and Monuments Review process will allow the public to participate in the naming of new landmarks and the commissioning of new public art that will reflect the values of inclusiveness, dignity, and a respect for the diversity of our citizens, visitors, and history. Public input is a vital next step before the Landmarks and Monuments Review process can move forward. The following presentation will outline the Landmarks and Monuments Review criteria and process, and we welcome questions and look forward to public input at the conclusion of the presentation. And with that, Carrie, can you share your screen, please?
Yes.
Great.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So like I said, this was initiated this past summer during the protest for racial justice and equity when pieces of our public art became sites of violence because they were perceived as symbols of racism. Slide 2. Since initiating this effort, there have been several meetings and discussions with the city operating departments responsible for these assets. Discussions with the Pathways to Reform, Transformation, and Reconciliation Steering Committee, and that's comprised of about 73 for-profit and nonprofit academic and religious leaders in the city. And we've also met with the Pathways to Reform, Transformation, and Reconciliation Leadership Working Group, which are managers and workers within city operating departments. Slide 3, Carrie. We also had conversations with the chairs of the Art Commission and Historical Commission, and also with the City Council Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs chairperson, and a briefing to all City Council members and staff. The draft of the criteria and process is a result of those discussions and also the review of what other cities and universities have done, much around Confederate-related artworks. Slide 4. So there are 3 things that came out of those discussions and learned from our research. One is that it is really important for this to be a public-driven process. The second is that it needs to be a high hurdle. Like renaming or making changes to any landmark or monument should be an exceptional event. And the third thing was that there needs to be a pause between the process to approve changing a landmark or monument and the process of developing the new name or monument. Slide 5. So in those discussions, there was also a lot of time focused on the criteria that the city should be using to consider making any change. And an important part of that question was whether or not the city should have a broad criteria or guiding principle or something very specific that's quantifiable. And a response from a lot of those discussions was that it needed to be a hybrid of both. Slide 6. So this is the guiding principle that we came up with. The names of Philadelphia's landmarks, its streets, parks, plazas, recreation centers, buildings, and playgrounds, and its public art and monuments are a commemoration and a memorialization of the past. The names and monuments communicate Philadelphia's values, confer honor, and assert pride. The city of Philadelphia values inclusiveness, integrity, and a respect for the diversity of its citizenry, visitors, and history. Hence, we'll consider renaming or changing any landmark or monument that does not align with these values. The city will also ensure that the future naming of its landmarks and installation of future monuments reflect its values. So this is the draft guiding principle that really drove the criteria in the process. Carrie, you can go to just to slide 8. So I'm proposing that the city uses the following criteria to rename a landmark or remove or make a change to a piece of public art or monument. The first is that the specific behavior of the person after whom the landmark or monument is named is not aligned with the city's values of inclusiveness, integrity, and a respect for the diversity of its citizens, visitors, and history. And as you can see in parentheses, I added central to his or her life as a whole. And in our discussions, like George Washington is a really good example. So his morally repugnant behavior of being a plantation and slave owner is not central to his life and his accomplishments as a whole of leading the colonies through the Revolutionary War and being the first president. So for criteria 1, we want this behavior to be central to who this person is and what they are known for. Second, we want the sources or the strength of the historical evidence of the behavior is clear and unambiguous. Third, the impact or harm that the continued use of the name or current display of the monument/public art may inflict on its citizens and visitors is clear and unambiguous. Slide 9. The fourth criteria is that there's strong public support that the landmark's name should change or the public art/monument removed or change. And the fifth criteria is that it is not possible to mitigate by recontextualizing, recognizing, and or addressing the individual's wrongful behavior in a prominent way due to the type or location of the landmark or public art or monument. So an example of this would be the Taney Street name. You know, it's so long that there is no way for us to prominently address Supreme Court Justice Roger Taney's behavior, who's responsible for the Dred Scott decision ruling that African Americans were not citizens. So there's no one location where the city could do that, where it would be seen and understood for the length of this street. So that's an example where it would not be possible to mitigate or recontextualize. Slide 10. So I'm going to go through the process, the outline of this process, and we recognize that for each step, there are probably multiple steps and details that need to be determined, and conversations like this will help to fill in some of those spaces. Slide 11, transparent oversight. The mayor will appoint a Landmarks and Monuments Review Commission to oversee the Landmarks and Monuments Review process. The commission will include representatives from the mayor's office, city council, the managing director's office, and members of the Philadelphia community that reflect the diversity of Philadelphia, including members with an expertise in diverse histories. Slide 12. The commission will make recommendations to the administration as to if a request to change the name of a landmark or change or remove a piece of public art or a monument should or should not be approved due to the objectionable history of the person or event after whom the landmark has been named or celebrates. The commission will ensure that each decision is made with thoughtfulness, fairness, and a commitment to ensure that the names of the city's landmarks and its public art and monuments reflect the city's values. Slide 13. Landmark renaming or public art and monument changes or removal must be driven by the public. The city will develop a landmark and public art/monument change request form made available online and hard copy, where any member of the public or any organization can submit a landmark name change or public art change or removal requests. The form will include a request for information, including information pertaining to criteria 1, 2, and 3 in slide 8. So that was, what's the behavior that is not in alignment with our values? What's the evidence supporting the abhorrent behavior? And how would the continued use of the name or the display of the public art be harmful to our citizens and visitors in history? The commission will review the written requests, and if the commission agrees that the request satisfies these three criteria, a conditioned approval to rename, change, or remove is given. And this is just conditioned, it's not official. Slide 14. Public support. If the commission grants conditioned approval to rename, change, remove a landmark or public art or monument, the person or the organization that submits the request will have 6 months to gather public support. Public supports includes 300 signatures on a petition from residents who reside within a 4-mile radius of the landmark or monument, or if it's a street name, 300 signatures of residents or businesses that reside on the street. And we would have to come up with an alternative if it's a street that does not have 300 residents or businesses that reside. Maybe it's a percentage of the residents. Slide 15. The requester must also acquire written conditioned approval from the city council member or members to rename, change, or remove of a landmark or a public art / monument in whose district the landmark or monument is located. And we just want to make sure that city council is aware that this request has been made, and city council's approval will allow for the process to move forward. And if the commission does not approve the written request because criteria 1, 2, or 3 are not met, the applicant can resubmit the request after gathering additional information to meet criteria 1, 2, or 3. And if all of the above are satisfied, the request moves forward to move from conditioned approval to official approval. Slide 16, a public meeting. The commission will hold a public meeting that allows for a discussion and public engagement on the request to change a landmark's name or change or remove a piece of public art or monument. The public meeting will allow for information on the history of the behavior of the person or event that does not align with the city's values of inclusiveness, integrity, and a respect for the diversity of its citizenry, visitors, and history to be heard. Slide 17. The commission will review the information and testimony shared at the public meeting and the evidence of public support. The commission will make a recommendation to the administration to approve or deny the request to change the name of a landmark or change or remove a piece of public art or monument. Slide 18. So if the administration gives official approval to rename a landmark or change a piece of public art or monument, the Office of Public Engagement will assist with working with the appropriate operating department to engage the public with a focus on engaging the geographical community in which the landmark is located to identify a new name or identify the new context for the public art or monument. And this is what I was talking about when I said that there was a pause between the process to approve changing a landmark or monument and the process of developing the new name or the monument change. And this is important just because the request to change could be a contentious conversation, and this inclusive process of coming up with a new name or new context could be a healing conversation. So having space between the two is very important. And there are two very different types of conversations. And also, if the request to change the name is not approved, the requesters would not have already gone through the trouble and effort of coming up with a new name. So that's the reason for this hard stop between the two. And then if the administration does not give approval to rename a landmark or monument or a piece of public art or monument, the applicant will receive an explanation as to why it was not approved. Slide 19. So these are sort of our new guidelines that we're proposing for landmark renaming and new monument commissions. No landmark can be named or monument erected after a person who is living. A landmark can be named or a monument erected to commemorate or celebrate a historic event or a person if the person has been deceased for at least 20 years or the historic event occurred 20 years prior to the current date. And one of the reasons for this is that history reveals itself. And then also communities and neighborhoods change over time. So this will allow for sort of current sort of communities to have a better understanding of sort of the names that are being proposed. All proposed new names and new public art / monument commissions must align with the City of Philadelphia's values of inclusiveness, integrity, and a respect for the diversity of its citizenry, visitors, and history. Slide 20. The commission must recommend the new name or monument change to the administration, and the administration's approval is needed to have the change implemented. The administration will authorize the appropriate operating department to make the change. City Council must approve the landmark name change of any street, park, recreation center, plaza, building, or playground, which is currently written in a city ordinance. Slide 21. The Art Commission must approve any changes or removal of a piece of public art or monument, and the Philadelphia Historical Commission must approve any changes or the removal of public art or monuments if the public art or monument is designated historic. Slide 22. The implementation of the name change of the landmark or the change or the removal of a piece of public art or monument will occur once either public or private funding is identified. Slide 23. So please, that's the end of the presentation. I welcome comments from and questions from City Council. Also, this presentation is on creativephl.org, and we encourage the public to go on and provide input or ask questions on this review process, and we will be seeking that input through May 30th. So that's the end of the presentation, and Carrie, you can stop sharing your screen.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative. I have a couple of questions and then I'll open it up to my colleagues. The first is that, and I think we talked about this on a briefing and I can't recall your answer, but I know we talked about the fact that now we ask that before a monument or a street naming or something of that sort of thing happens, that it's the person's deceased 10 years. As you heard, we just did one for Rob Stewart, who was deceased 10 years. The idea that it will be 20 years. Can you talk about that change? I don't know why we're moving the goalpost from 10 to 20. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, just from looking at different cities, it's 10 years or 20 years usually. And even with our current sort of 10-year sort of legislation or process, it's not consistently enforced. It's more of an understanding. Rob Stewart is an amazing person. He makes me want to rethink, this 20-year mark. But I think the intention is, and so it's open for change and discussion, is really the fact that history does reveal itself, and also communities and neighborhoods do change. And so it's just sort of finding a balance so current residents of communities have some sort of connection to that name of that landmark or that monument. And just to sort of link it a little bit to what Councilwoman Sanchez said in her comments, I think part of it is that we as a city, we do not do a good job of educating and celebrating the people that we have our current landmarks named after. I think if you ask people in communities, why is the recreation center you go to named what it is, most would not know. And so I think it's, to your point, that 10 year or 20 years, we can sort of discuss it, but the intention is to make sure that history will have enough time to reveal itself and then also sort of the current residents of the community would have a say and be able to influence what that name is.
I hear you. I think 10 years is a reasonable number, and I'll tell you why. One of the things about a lot of neighborhoods, and I'm going to use Germantown as an example, where there's rapid gentrification in some parts of Germantown. And so you have some neighborhoods that look different 5 years ago that are going to look different 5 years from now. And so the people who may have been in those neighborhoods and who know the folks from the block who held down the neighborhood, kept the kids safe, stopped the trouble that was happening on the block, and who passed away, might not be known by the people who come afterwards. So I just think that 20 years moves it just further down the line, and really we lose an opportunity to recognize people who have been fighting to save neighborhoods for a long time. So I just wanted to put that on, and I hope we can talk about that moving forward. The other thing I wanted to ask was regarding the criteria, process, input, et cetera, around, the public review. There were a lot of different organizations, city agencies, different groups that were named. And I want to make sure, can you talk about the diversity among all of those people who were listed initially, and what was the makeup of that group? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I don't have the demographics of the makeup of the group, but if you look at the steering committee of the reconciliation transformation, that long name, like the 73 members, that is a highly diverse group, racially, different sort of backgrounds. And we got great input from having discussions with that group. And a lot of the religious leaders were part of those discussions, and really sort of hammered this, it needs to be driven by the public. And then the other thing that we heard a lot from, the leadership group, which is more sort of city staff, and that group is very diverse. And I would say the majority of the leadership working group are made up of Black and Brown city workers. And they too were very adamant about the process being public driven. And then also sort of, we need to do a better job of communicating, celebrating and educating sort of people in our communities about why certain landmarks are named what they are.
Can we, do you think by the end of the hearing, we could have sort of like a tally of, what the numbers look like in terms of diversity? Right. I think that just would help give us a stronger sense of what it looked like. And I hear you. It was a significant number, but I just like to have some sort of a sense of in terms of what that was. When we go on when we fight for minority participation and inclusion on construction sites, and a lot of times they're like, well, we have 20% or 30%, and that sometimes is considered significant, which I don't think is significant at all, in my opinion. But if we could talk about that and get a sense of what the numbers look like, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, we can get that. The other thing is, this is an outline, and I would be more than happy to, give this presentation in any council district, in any community meeting, to get input from, our citizens in these communities, prior to moving forward. Like for us, the public input was critically important, especially if we wanted it to be a public driven process. Mm-hmm. And then also just engaging the public in the process gets them on board, right?
Yes.
And they have a better understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And also, some of these changes will not be inexpensive, and these are public dollars. So having the public to sort of have a say in the process, and for all the right reasons, we definitely want to encourage public input. And I would be more than happy to do this presentation for any community any community meeting that any of you are organizing.
That will be fantastic. And we may have you come on board and do some of our community meetings and talk about what the city is undertaking, because I think it's important for people to know. And I think it was Nelson Mandela who said, where you sit determines where you stand. And I just, as I was thinking about who's at the table, and that's going to determine what the outcome of this process is and what it looks like for Philadelphia in terms of addressing monuments, street namings, and all of that. Because, and I know you use George Washington as an example, that he was a slaveholder and he was also the first president. And so, he's more known, I guess, for being president. But for many of us, obviously so affected by slavery through generations and the aftermath of it, if you will, we know a lot of these people differently. So that's why where you sit determines where you're going to stand on how you feel about some of these people. One of the folks that came to mind to me as you were doing your presentation was Thomas Jefferson. And so when I looked at Thomas Jefferson, I just, did a quick Google and, what does it say about Thomas Jefferson when you just do a quick Wikipedia? And it says he was known for many things. He was an American statesman, a diplomat, a lawyer, architect, a philosopher, founding father, and president. I primarily think of Thomas Jefferson as a pedophile and as someone who was with a 15-year-old girl, which would be considered a pedophile today, in today's terms, when he was, I think, in his 40s or so, or, I'm not sure exactly at what age, and fathered many children, and while she was enslaved, so I don't think of Thomas Jefferson really in any of these ways, but I think of him in a completely different way, as we know that the carryover for slavery and the effects in our communities, in our lives, in racism, they carry over. So that's why it's so important that people have a say, because the sort of like the mainstream public may know Thomas Jefferson one way. I think for a lot of us in the African American community, we think of him a different way. Right. And it's none of what we're saying is made up or incorrect or or inconclusive. Like, these are all proven facts. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Councilwoman Gauthier has a question, and then followed by Councilwoman Sanchez.
As I just wanted to reiterate a few things that you brought up, Madam Chair. First of all, thank you so much for putting this bill forward. I think it's very important. I wanted to agree that I think 20 years is too long. I understand your rationale, but in thinking about my own community, we have a rec center in Mantua, for instance, called Miles Mack Rec Center. And it was named after, a community leader, Miles Mack, who, put together all kinds of youth programs to keep kids away from violence. And he was gunned down at the rec center, while he was working with kids, right? And that happened in 2008, I believe. So had we waited 20 years, that important monument to just, a critical community leader wouldn't have happened. So I think that might be a bit too long. Yeah. I also wanted to go back to the point about, how we're sort of thinking about these historical figures. And I understand that it's very difficult to put together criteria that would work for something as complex as this. But when I heard you say that, when thinking about the behavior, that it had to be something that was central to the person's life, many times oppressed people don't get to define what is central to someone's life and how, in terms of how it's described in history. And so history is mostly written by the folks who are on top, right? And so how someone is described historically can be very different from what they actually did and the impact that it had on people. So I just wanted to name that as a difficulty in how we're having these conversations and making these decisions.
Right. And I just want to add, that's the reason why it's not just to have the art or the monument or remove it, right? It's this opportunity to recontextualize it. And to your point, and also to Councilwoman Bass's point, for, our statues of Thomas Jefferson, our statues of George Washington, we have the opportunity to put something in front of it, like they did at President's House, to tell a completed story that includes the things that some of our history books do not include. And so I think that is an important part of the process. It's not just do we keep it or do we remove it, but for some of them, I think sort of recontextualizing it, because so many people see it, people who understand that the history is more than just what you read in Wikipedia, and those who don't, it's an opportunity to educate people.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important too. But I might also add, looking at how egregious the action was and its ultimate impact on people, even if it's not described as the core of that person.
Of what they're known by. I understand. Point taken. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you so much for your work. I do think this is really important.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also want to thank Kelly Lee. This is not an easy process. And so we're trying to balance, how do we tell our story, good, bad, or indifferent, right? And then how do we memorialize people? I look at this because, as you know, for me, the rebuild projects have become an opportunity to brand and neighborhoods and their history, right? And so it's hugely important that we try to be as proactive as possible. But at the same time, I have a lot of parks and rec named after wonderful people, veterans, folks who contributed. And for me, the issue is we got to pick a time and a space, but we also got to figure out when we do these memorials, and that's why I said it's important for the family to stay involved, is sort of how do we incorporate that family and the legacy as part of the work? If, for me, the naming of something means we adapt and we support and we value and we uplift, what that person meant. And I think it's a missed opportunity for stories. So can you tell me in this process, and I know it was difficult, in this process, what kind of recommendations would you give to us? Because again, I faced this because I'm in neighborhoods where people are like, well, we don't know this person. And I'm like, yeah, but he was a veteran, whatever. And they still feel like, well, this no longer represents me. So how do we proactively use these as educational tools? What did you learn in this process?
Yeah.
So that as we move forward, we really look at creating a mechanism, institutionalizing it, supporting, again, uplifting the value as to why people came together initially for any naming.
Right. That's a really good question. And as part of this process, the first thing we had to do is create a database, right, of all these assets. And there are over 8,000 of them. You look at the names of all of our facilities, our parks, our stuff, all of our public art, and then you remove out streets that are numbers, right? We're not changing those. But one of the things that I think that is an opportunity is, and I was talking to the folks at OIT about this, is that, we have an opportunity to provide information about these building names, about these recreation center names. And how do we do that in a way that is user friendly for the everyday person to get access? And one of the things that, OIT is working on is that, if it's with an app, right, you can sort of look up the, on their sort of database, you can sort of be at a recreation center, sort of see it on your phone and get a description of who the person, the name of it and who is it named after, et cetera. And so I think that just sort of, and we don't have all of that information. We have this database of 8,000 assets. And, besides knowing that some of our streets, are named after former governors of Pennsylvania, there isn't a lot of information about a lot of our names. So I think that's the first step, is trying to gather that information about our current assets and then figure out a process that we can easily and in an engaging way share that information with people to make them curious about, the names of their parks, their recreation centers that they're going to every day. But that is a problem. We don't have that tool right now.
Yeah, no, and I want to make sure that wherever we land on this, it's such an important moment to like reflect. And again, I know folks don't like to relive bad history, right? Or, emotional times, and people have a right to feel how they feel. It's sort of an opportunity to also educate. And so for me, it's sort of like I want to honor the legacy and the history of certain neighborhoods, the good and the challenges, right, that they all represent. And it's, that's kind of what I'm looking for, some guidance, right, around that, right? We have rec centers, so maybe you name the plaza, not the rec center. Maybe people have started planting trees for folks. I mean, like, we want to recognize and honor all those things. I just think that this space requires a lot of thinking, right? Because you don't want to think for, again, that, 20 years is a long time, 10 years, 5 years. We're living a particular moment, as folks did in the 60s and the 70s. And when they named these institutions, parks, or whatever, I'm sure it was just as emotionally charged as we feel today. And so you don't want to clear that history off for people, but so there has to be a balance. Like, I'm of the belief that, again, this conversation is hard to have, needs to be had, but I think that creates an opportunity for us to say, how do we recognize our history and then still provide these very important for families. We're working at Ramonito Rivera, and the family is very, very emotionally attached. As one of the first Puerto Rican women leaders in the city, and it's sort of like the last thing I want to do as a Puerto Rican woman is not totally honor her at the way that she deserves. But it's sort of like, that's why I think these recognitions are important. They have to be tied into a long-term commitment to using and honoring these people in a way that their legacy brings value for many years to come, because it's something that we're embracing. Right. So it's hard, and I don't know that, again, this process has been hard. I just think having more and more of these conversations is just going to help us all. We want to honor all people. All got to United States of America through different struggles, right? We're here, and the folks who were here before we got here went through their struggles, and it's sort of like, I think there's an intersection with all of that, right. And I hope that we can find it. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman. Are there any additional questions from members of council for this witness? And seeing that there's none in the chat, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And if we could have the clerk call the next panel of witnesses to testify.
And I just want to make sure, Modesto, did you need a short break for the public comment?
I believe all the public comment participants are in via Teams, Sabrina.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So our first three witnesses, go ahead, Councilwoman.
No, I was just going to say, if you could call them in, I know it looks like a long panel. If you could just call them in a group of three, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the first three witnesses are Donna Fan Boyle, co-founder of the Coalition of Natives and Allies, member of the American Indian Movement in Central Texas, and co-director of the American Indian Movement Woodlands Territory Support Group, followed by Mabel Negrete, executive director and co-founder of Indigenous Peoples Day Philly Incorporated, and then Elsa Colfin, community organizer at Bend the Arc.
Should I go?
Yes, thank you. If we can have, well, 1 second, I apologize. If we can have Ms. Donna Fan Boyle go first, and then the others speak in that order, that would be great. So, Ms. Fan Boyle, if you would state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Halito. Sahachifa Yadana Famboil, Chatamicha Chalakisia, Cha Afamali Hat Sanayapa. Hello, my name is Donovan Boyle. I am Choctaw and Cherokee. I am happy to meet you. I'm a member in good standing of American Indian Movement Central Texas, co-director of American Indian Movement Woodlands Territory Support Group. I'm also one of the co-founders of the Coalition of Natives and Allies, and I have a seat on the Middletown Township Human Relations Commission. I would like to acknowledge that Pennsylvania exists on the tribal lands of the Erie, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, Muncie, Shawnee, and Susquehanna. Thank you, Philadelphia Council and Mayor Kenny, for this opportunity to give testimony regarding Resolution 210308, the Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs review process of the City of Philadelphia's landmarks and monuments. Thank you for taking this step to make the City of Brotherly Love more inclusive and welcoming atmosphere to the original peoples whose homelands we stand on, and for all visitors to these lands. In order to honor Native peoples, there should be no space on Native homelands in the City of Brotherly Love for monuments, statues, and artwork to honor oppressors, abusers, and terrorists, who in this day would be jailed for their crimes. Memorializing Columbus and other oppressors as heroes is psychologically damaging to minority communities and misrepresents history. He and others like him should be removed from their pedestals so they will no longer be a constant reminder of their murderous reign over Native peoples. Native people and allies have worked for decades to bring awareness to the true history of the United States' genocidal policies against Native Americans, which includes forced removal from homelands, forcibly taking children as young as 4 years old to boarding schools to have the Indian beaten out of them, sterilization without consent, government military sanctioned massacres of innocent Native women, men, children, and elderly. All of these acts were carried out by people who do not deserve to be celebrated as heroic. School children are not educated about or accurately educated about Native peoples, but they are subjected to seeing monuments to abusers and terrorists. Now, specifically regarding Columbus monuments, I will read Columbus's own words from his personal journal, which captures the ominous fate that awaited the Arawaks. Quote, "They do not bear arms and do not know them, for I showed them a sword and they took it by the edge and cut themselves out of ignorance. They have no iron, for their spears are made of pain. They would make fine servants. With 50 men, we could subjugate them all and make them do whatever we want," unquote. Soon after that, he and his men kidnapped a number of Arawaks and forced them to identify other sources of gold throughout the region. With an extensive arsenal of advanced weaponry, Columbus and his men arrived on the islands that were later named Cuba and Hispaniola, present-day Dominican Republic, and Haiti. Upon arrival, the sheer magnitude of gold, which was readily available, set into motion a relentless wave of murder, rape, pillaging, and slavery that would forever alter the course of human history. Columbus and his men rained violence centuries ago, and presently his supporters rain violence in Philadelphia, making Marconi Plaza dangerous for natives and allies who speak the truth about Columbus's reign of terror. When Ron Joseph arrived at Marconi Plaza on Sunday night on day 2 of a chaotic protest that brought at times a few hundred white men from South Philadelphia to protect the statue of Christopher Columbus, some bearing rifles, baseball bats, or golf clubs as silent wardings, he intended only to check on his friends who were observing or counter-protesting. Within a half hour, the 24-year-old Northeast Philadelphia resident fled with a broken nose and pepper spray burning his eyes. "This really was an act of mob violence," he said, "and the police did not do a thing to help me or any of the other people who were violently attacked by the protesters. The police just stood by and instead were encouraging them. They were congratulating them. They were also encouraging by inaction. They laughed." Video shot by his friends appears to back the claims of Joseph and a half dozen others who say police allowed the Columbus defenders to swarm around them, punch them, push them to the ground, kick and stomp on them, burn them with lighters, cigarettes, and cigars, sexually assault them, and shove them into busy Broad Street traffic. Again, Columbus and his men rained violence centuries ago, and presently his supporters rain violence in Philadelphia, making Marconi Plaza dangerous for natives and allies who speak the truth about Columbus' reign of terror. Columbus is finally where he belongs, imprisoned in solitary confinement for his crimes against humanity. Please don't release him back to Philadelphia to again stir physical and psychological harm. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We really appreciate it, and for you being an activist and fighting on behalf of our community. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing and speaking to power, truth to power. Thank you. If we can have our next witness state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you, Councilperson Cindy Bass, for the invitation. My name is Mabel Negrete. I am the co-founder and I served as Executive Director for Indigenous Peoples Day Philly. I am here to testify on behalf of my organization, and provided that the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is implemented and guaranteed in the decision-making process of this resolution, we won't be able to support the resolution 210308. Unfortunately, as it stands, this resolution lacks integrity that will ensure the rights of Indigenous peoples. The resolution does not take into consideration the disproportionate representation of Indigenous voices in the city. By the logic of the population that you guys have stated earlier, Indigenous peoples are only 1 in 115 members of residents within the boundaries of the city. So that actually puts us and puts everybody at risk of continuing to be disproportionately represented. But we affirm the importance of reassessing all monuments, statues, holidays, and any other public commemoration that perpetrates inaccurate histories and genocide. It is our time and our duty for our next generation to reshape society's values and to transform its public spaces or places into safe spaces for all, and we mean all of us. Because we have an acute awareness of historical erasure and the need to celebrate heritage, specifically because of our attempt genocide, we will never deny other cultural groups the opportunity to celebrate their heritage. However, when a city and public officials support the portrayal of individuals who have committed genocidal violence against Indigenous peoples, African Americans, and other relatives, they're also condoning violence against each of our future generations. Therefore, it is extremely important, for example, that Columbus statues and its day, are reevaluated immediately with the full participation and consent. And I mean consent, not just consultation, okay, of the Indigenous peoples of the region, including the Indigenous Caribbean. And when I mean Indigenous peoples of the region, we mean the Nanticoke and Lenape, the Delaware tribe of Indians who are in the diaspora, all the Lenape communities in the diaspora, and including the native populations that are here in Philadelphia and in the region. Columbus committed and condoned genocide by war, enslavement, sexual violence, human trafficking, displacement, and dehumanization of Indigenous Caribbean. And this mode of operandi became the framework for the invasion of the American. And this also became the framework for the expansion or the invasion of what is now, it continued to be Lenapehoking, the territory of the Lenape. So also we want to consider how this monuments affects us, and we are disproportionately represented. So I would like to ask sincerely to this council, body, and also the city government, that you really need to consider creating a Native American Indigenous representation immediately to address this resolution and future resolutions, or anything that relates to matters about Indigenous rights. Because at this moment, you have not done that work. Furthermore, it is very concerning that the resolution is co-sponsored by Council Member Scalia, who is also in support of the frivolous lawsuit against Mayor Kenney for abolishing Columbus Day. The double standard by those proposing this resolution is extremely problematic to us because it threatens the integrity of the resolution, which I think, and we think, is a great idea. We need this. However, there's a lot of issues with it, of how you're proceeding. So I would like to ask again that you include us and include not only our organization, but all the organizations and Native American organizations that are here, including the tribes that we mentioned. If this resolution is intended to uplift indigenous communities that have been harmed by the legacy of white supremacy and settler colonialism, it is equally important that those who are leading this effort are also called into question and also rectify what they're harming or how you guys are proceeding and how you are actually exacerbating the situation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your testimony. I can only tell you that, you certainly have a cause, and we certainly want to make sure that we're inclusive and that we're hearing everybody's viewpoint and doing things properly, decently, and in order. So we certainly want to make sure that you are included and follow up to see what we can do. If there are things that we can do and work together, we would love to be able to do that.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. If we could have our next testifier state your name for the record, and please begin with your testimony.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to give public comment on this resolution. Shalom, my name is Elsa Chalfin, and I am a resident in Council District 3 and a volunteer organizer with Bend the Arc Jewish Action Southeastern Pennsylvania, a local chapter of a national organization of Jews committed to fighting for justice and equality for all in the United States. I support and uplift the comments made by the members of the public who spoke before me, and I agree with the comments made by Cindy Bass and Jamie Gautier. I don't know if I pronounced your name right. I apologize if I didn't. About not extending the timeline to 20 years and about refining how the criteria outlined by Kelly Lee in Panel 1 is utilized. I affirm what was shared about where we sit shapes how we see a person and their actions essential to their lives. I think we need a deeper and broader exploration in the application of the criteria, particularly in this assessment of whether the actions were central to the person's life or not. Colonialism and chattel slavery were central to George Washington's life. Particularly, he would not have had colonies to lead or a, quote, country to be president of if it weren't for the violent colonization and genocide of indigenous peoples. Additionally, regarding Christopher Columbus statues and days, we assess him not by his heritage but by his actions. As we know, it is dangerous to view one individual as representational of an entire group of people or culture, and his actions reflect on him, not on Italian culture. As Mayor Kenny has said, symbols carry power, and I, myself as a Jew, imagine if we had state-sanctioned Adolf Hitler Day or statues in our city of Spanish Catholic inquisitors, how deeply this would impact my experience of feeling respected, safe, or welcome in our city, and how painful it would be for me to encounter symbols, statues, and other representations of this harm in public spaces, especially in ways where the harm is not recognized. So I affirm the importance of reckoning with monuments, statues, holidays, and other public commemorations. Especially as a person in diaspora, I feel and support the importance of celebrating cultural and ethnic heritage. And symbols are statements, and it is imperative for our public spaces to recognize the vast harms wrought by colonialism and chattel slavery and maintained now by white body supremacy. We need to tell the truth of all of our histories in our public spaces. So I'm in support of the resolution overall, but not as it stands, and I support the recommendations made by Mabel, the speaker before me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, duly noted, and we appreciate you being here and your comments and suggestions today. Thank you very much. And in particular, your point around the idea of the horrifying idea of if there was such a thing as a Hitler statue or some sort of a monument, and how painful and terrible that would be. And we need to really put these things in that context. So I thank you for your comments and for your acknowledgement of, how painful these issues are. If we could have Madam Clerk call the next group of individuals to testify.
So council support does have 3 individuals on the phone. So that are Queen Judith Robinson, Erica Gold, and Rochelle Lee Schneider, and followed by Kazia Ridgway, who's available in Teams.
Okay, very good. If we could have Ms. Robinson, please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Please give council support just a couple minutes
Oh, I'm
to get
sorry.
them
I
on the
thought you said
phone.
they were on. I'm sorry. Okay.
We do have Kazia Ridgway who is on.
Are we able to proceed, or should we wait if council technical staff could give us advice on that? Do we need to pause, or should we proceed?
Yes, you can proceed, and then we'll need to take a quick pause to get the remaining participants in.
Okay. So since we have Ms. Ridgway, why don't we proceed, and then we'll take a quick pause. Okay. Ms. Ridgway, would you please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Kazia Ridgway. I hope you can hear me. I'd like to fully acknowledge that I'm a lifelong resident of Philadelphia, which was and still is Lenape-Hokian land. I'm an ally and stand in solidarity with Indigenous Peoples Day Philly, and I'm also a member of Melanated Educators Collective, Racial Justice Organizing Committee, BLM Philly, and an African American history and anthropology teacher here in the city of Philadelphia. I'm here today in support of the IPD Philly org. Every year since 2017, IPD has produced an annual cultural festival and awareness campaign for Indigenous Peoples Day. As many of you know, our Indigenous brothers and sisters continue to be silenced and disregarded when it comes to their culture, contributions, and history. This is a byproduct of the genocide, enslavement, and trafficking that has been meted out since Christopher Columbus landed in the Caribbean West Indies, never in the United States, by the way, after encountering the Arawak, Taínos, Carib peoples, and continued with further European invasion throughout the rest of Turtle Island, aka the Americas. Based on Columbus' own diary, we know that he viewed the Taíno, Carib, and Arawak peoples as those who would be good servants, and later said he would carry 6 of them home, beginning a long tradition of human trafficking and slavery. In addition, and I encourage all of you to read this, in a short account of the destruction of the Indies, Bartolomé de las Casas said, "The Spaniards who no sooner had knowledge of these peoples than they became like fierce wolves and tigers and lions who have gone many days without food or nourishment. And no other thing have they done for 40 years until this day, and still today see fit to do, but dismember, slay, perturb, afflict, torment, and destroy the Indians by all manner of cruelty. We know that the Spaniards, later governed by Columbus's son, continued to commit atrocious acts against the Taíno Carib peoples, including genocide, rape, and bodily mutilation. This behavior of the colonists against the native peoples of the land did not end in the Caribbean. Instead, it became the standard all over the Americas, including right here in Lenape-Hokian. As a result of these actions, the native indigenous peoples of the Americas continued to fight to preserve their culture, languages, and in many cases were dispossessed of their land. I request that the city always collaborate and ask for the consent of and with indigenous people, especially those who historically own this land, in any decision-making process moving forward whenever possible, and relevant to their rights and sovereignty as established by the UN Declaration of Indigenous Rights. And finally, while I support this renaming process, I can't support the process as it currently stands. And that is for 3 reasons. One, we all know that certain neighborhoods are very racist and dangerous for Black and Indigenous folks and other peoples of color. So if you need to go into these neighborhoods to find support, that could turn very violent, as we saw last summer. So that's a significant barrier to this actually happening in terms of changing names or bringing down monuments. Also, in thinking about Columbus Boulevard, people from around the city all frequent this area. So I don't think it's fair that it's limited to just those who live in the neighborhoods. And number 3, and this is a question, were the Lenape, Delaware, Carib, Taino, or other indigenous peoples in the area consulted at all when you were creating this criteria? And as Mabel stated, if the person has harmed indigenous people and the population is not there due to genocide and displacement, is that fair? Thank you all for your time.
Well, thank you very much for your thoughts and for laying that out for us. And there's certainly a lot there to take back and to consider. So thank you very much for your testimony today. And if we could now take a quick break, and we will have council support if you want to go ahead and dial up some of the other folks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for calling Philadelphia City Council.
Modesto, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, Madam Chair, we are now live.
Chair Bass, are you there? Sorry for the delay. The chair is coming back.
Thank you very much. I apologize for the delay. Okay, if we are ready, can we proceed and have Madam Clerk, if you could call the next panel of witnesses to testify.
Queen Judith Robinson, Erica Gold, Rochelle Lee Schneider, Ben Keys, and Adam DePaul.
And in that order, if we could have you state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony, that would be great.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yes, Queen Judith Robinson here to testify on Resolution 210308. I'm here as the director of Strawberry Mansion Civic Association and also as a member of East Fairmount Park Coalition. And I agree with a prior guest that education as it relates to these issues of monuments and memorial, especially relates on public lands, is very important. We don't know in the African American community much about history. Earlier today or this week, I sent to each of your office a video of my research and partnership with Woodford Mansion in Fairmount Park. I hope you all will review it at your leisure and give me a little critique. I am a tour guide. I am a researcher, thorough research, because I am of the foundation that you bring a document with your statement, so that way we don't have any kind of mix-up as to what the facts are. Because if we go by the facts, then we won't have so many different various stories. Now, I know because it's been such a discrepancy or downright disgrace in how American history has been taught, especially as it relates to Black and our Native folk history. So I'm going to say we must have more diversity in the research. I helped research the Mander recreation story, and I partnered with Fairmount Park Conservancy and insisted that a signage be put out there in front of the rec center. It was the area where I grew up in Strawberry Mansion. We never knew that story, and it is such a powerful story. And they put signage out there, and this new generation of residents of Strawberry Mansion are just flabbergasted to find out the story. It's a powerful story. It's not a right word. We need to research our stories. We need to see the benefit of the economics of telling our story. We need to train the next generation. So I'm here today to hopefully ask you all to broaden your thought processes. A whole lot of land is being used in Fairmount Park for various enterprises. I want to make sure that you all are cognizant of the business opportunities. I celebrated my birthday for the past 2 years prior to COVID on top of my childhood bridge, the Strawberry Mansion Bridge. I even had them play Happy Birthday to me, the band play Happy Birthday to me. That was like my dream. But I didn't have to bring a cake and all the party favors. Parks on Tap was on Strawberry Mansion Bridge for 2 years. So I had myself a good old time celebrating, and I hope they hurry up and come back. But that's a tourism dream. Can you imagine that? Watching the sunset on the Strawberry Mansion Bridge, having all the fun and libation you want right there, friends and family. It's a beautiful thing. In North Philly, in Strawberry Mansion, we, the people, want to be, and I'm going to get crude, we want to know where the dollar's at. How can we use our expertise. We are experts. I'm an expert. I got 30 years of behind me. So I want to know, how can I train the next generation with the skills that I have as a business person, and teach them how to research their history so they can feel better about themselves. We're not begging up in North. We're buying. And then our ancestors left before us. They were not slaves. They were enslaved with a lot of skills. So if you know your history, then we wouldn't be scurrying around trying to figure out whether we should speak loudly about whether we should be included in the economy because we worked without pay for many years. How you add that up to get us a couple dollars now so that we can spread all this tourism and billions of dollars in this that's coming through this town in the name of a virus and a pandemic. When we reset, revitalize, and renew, let's make sure we don't carry the old, tired, petty, niggardly behavior with us, and I use that word, the stinginess, if you know the word, so that we're being petty in our ideas and not carrying everybody else along as the tide's supposed to lift all boats. We near the Schuylkill River rowing and carrying on. We want to make sure everybody get a little part of everything. So please don't make it so hard for us to jump through hoops for a little couple dollars that'll be used up right away. Take some of them millions, billions. We having billions coming in here. Please stop. That's why I'm here. Make sure you all don't forget us uptown, because we got skills and we want to show you what we're working with. And then we're going to bring you a return on investment because tourism is big business. So as the land is being used, keep an eye on who's using it, their inclusion policy. That's easy enough to do, you all. We can kick out poverty in a New York second by including everybody. On that, you all have a great weekend. Beautiful weather. Let's enjoy it. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate, as always, your testimony, and you're always right on point on these issues. Thank you very much. If we could have the next person here to testify, state your name for the record and begin with your testimony. I believe our next person is Erika Gold. Is Erika Gold?
Okay. Hi. Yes, it's Erica. Hello, my name is Erica Gold.
Erica.
Hi. I'm here to talk about this resolution. I want to start by thanking other folks who have spoken and who continue to speak, especially who are Black and Indigenous, especially those whose stolen land we are on. I'm an Indigenous person to Turtle Island, and what I wanted to say today is I have a different approach than some of the other speakers who have given their time and education and emotional labor. It is of my opinion that this committee and folks in generally know what should be done with racist, settler colonial statues, monuments, landmarks. They should be destroyed. They should be removed. In place should be education about the people and culture of the marginalized folks who are truly the backbone of the city and the land that was stolen. And I kind of feel like those who know that to be true know it, and those who do not are not going to be swayed now. And so I will simply just say that I'm here to remind folks that the voices they should listen to are the ones that are calling in now, the ones who are most affected by these monuments. And it is, quite frankly, racist and white supremacist to do anything other but eliminate them. And beyond that, it is above me now. everyone may go with God. They may do as they feel. Well, we all protect our peace, but the fact of the matter is Indigenous folks, Black folks, non-Black people of color will fight to be seen, will fight to be heard, will fight to have our liberation. And if the decision is to keep them or to do anything other than destroy those symbols of white supremacy, then we shall see you in the streets. And that will be what it is. And I thank you for your time.
Okay, well, thank you for your testimony today. We appreciate your comments. If we can have the next speaker state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Is Rochelle Lee Schneider here?
Hi. Yeah, hi. My name is Rochelle Lee Schneider. I am actually here today representing many neighbors in the First Ward. I have the privilege and opportunity to be the one speaking today. So I want to thank all of you for your time. I'm just going to read what together we wrote. We live in Passyunk Square. It's a beautiful neighborhood, and we are proud to live here. We love the neighborhood, we love the park, and we love the name Passyunk Square. The park is located between 12th and 13th Streets and Reed and Wharton. It was once called Passyunk Square. It is now called Columbus Square, and we request that it be restored to its earlier name, Passyunk Square. I'm echoing many sentiments that have been here before, so it feels like this is a very good trend in conversations. Unfortunately, we're still having to have it. But echoing an earlier caller, our neighborhood is a destination. People want to visit it. Rittenhouse Square has an actual square. Washington Square has a square. Passyunk Square has a East Passyunk Civic Association, has a Passyunk Ave. It's not a Columbus Square Civic Association. So it makes cohesive sense. But decades ago, the park was renamed Columbus Square to highlight the positive contributions Italian Americans have. We agree that Italian American community is valuable and honorable. And we agree that it ought to be appreciated in our public institutions. But as, again, echoing many of the callers, as historical research has unarguably shown, pointing to the history of Columbus is problematic. So we ask that our park be restored to its original name, honor the people that were there before us. But we're for unity. If there can be a monument, a statue, a mural named after a less problematic Italian American, we would love that. We would love to join hands, celebrate in our park together. There are many, many good people out there. Unfortunately, Columbus is not one of them. So, restoring the park's name to Passyunk Square would reflect the values of our community, and echo the sentiments of why this hearing is here today. Our neighborhood elementary school was named after President Andrew Jackson. Our community recently came together to object to the name of the school because it honors someone with a problematic history. A few years ago, neighborhood activists initiated a process to rename the school to better reflect the values of the committee, and that process has come to fruition, and the community is voting on the name change. We feel stronger, we feel more connected to a community that represents us and our values. So we're asking for a similar process to be around what is, was Passyunk Square, now Columbus Square. There's no better time than right now. The park is also undergoing renovations. So it seems like a win. win-win. And additionally, Passyunk Ave has a logo that is being re-envisioned to better honor the indigenous people of the Passyunk Square neighborhood. So thank you for your time, and we hope we can move forward with the name change. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate your comments. We could have the next speaker. I believe it's Ben Key. State your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chairperson Bass and members of the committee. My name is Ben Keys, and I'm a resident of South Taney Street in the Fittler Square neighborhood. I'm on the board of the directors of the Fittler Square Neighborhood Association, and I'm an educator at Penn, and you can see the office behind me. While this committee focuses on parks, recreation, and cultural affairs, I'm joining you today to ask you to take decisive action to rename Taney Street and describe the process that a volunteer group of residents and neighbors has undertaken over the past year to build consensus around this issue, hopefully by outlining the process that Councilmember Johnson's staff collaborated on and endorsed, and that the all-volunteer group executed over the past year with pro bono help from Connect the Dots, a community engagement firm. We can serve as a model for community engagement around issues regarding the renaming of streets, parks, and other monuments. Regarding the topic of today's hearing, I also hope that any commission review process is used to solicit genuine community feedback rather than as an obstructionist tool or a means of political cover that will inevitably cause delay to doing what is right. The awareness of Taney Street's problematic name is not new. Taney Street is named for Roger Taney, Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, who wrote the infamous Dred Scott decision. That decision ruled that Black Americans were not and could never be U.S. citizens, and that they, quote, had no rights that the white man was bound to respect, end quote. The decision was made in 1857, became a touch point of the cause of the Confederacy, and many believe prompted the Civil War. Minor Street in Fairmont was renamed Taney Street in his honor in 1858, and today Taney Street runs non-consecutively between 26th and 27th Streets from one end of the city to the other. I want to emphasize, and echoing the point that Queen Judith Robinson made, the first thing that we did was research, reviewing old maps and street guides, which were published annually at the time because names changed so frequently, and using the Philadelphia Historic Streets Index to confirm the timing of the name change precisely around the Dred Scott decision. It should be obvious to everyone here that Roger Taney, a slave-owning Marylander with no connection to the city, is an awful symbol for a city that prides itself on diversity and inclusiveness. In recent years, his statue has come down in Annapolis, Baltimore, and the U.S. Capitol. And last year, the Taney Baseball League, a nonprofit organization, renamed themselves the Philadelphia Dragons. So we neighbors on Taney Street were galvanized by the killing of George Floyd and many others at the hands of the police last year. Looking for problems close to home was quite easy. I could look out the window at my street sign and see a real and tangible representation of white supremacy that has stood for 163 years in this city. So how to go about doing something about it? Well, I couldn't go protest in the streets with a 4-month-old baby at home. And more generally, I'm coming to this broader set of systemic problems around racism from a clear position of privilege in the Fittler Square neighborhood. That said, I have the time, energy, and resources to pursue this specific task, and I encourage all nonviolent anti-racist efforts. Along with a group of residents on and near Taney Street, we first circulated a petition and started renametaney.com. Over 2,700 people signed our petition to rename the street. We held a public event at Marquardt Playground, known in the community as Taney Park. We built a coalition of partner organizations from the neighborhoods where Taney Street is present in South Philly. We also started meeting regularly with staff from Councilmember Kenyatta Johnson's office, where we developed and defined a community engagement process. It gave us a lot of work to do to establish community support. We also worked with a stakeholder engagement firm called Connect the Dots that provided many pro bono hours to design a robust community engagement process. Now, this is often done privately for a large-scale development project, not for something grassroots. And we had our hands tied with COVID, which made it difficult to go door to door to collect signatures. We decided to roll out a community survey and communicate it with door hangers on every door on Taney Street or within one block of Taney Street. And volunteers did this twice to every house in the 2nd District. We also hosted a virtual town hall facilitated by Connect the Dots and our volunteers from the local RCOs. The survey distribution and town hall took place at the end of 2020. The results from the survey and the town hall were striking. We found strong and overwhelming support for the name change. 89% of Taney Street residents who participated want to change the name. Now, of course, not every resident participated, but we recognized the digital divide and knew that some neighbors might not have internet or smartphones at home, so we provided door hangers with a phone number to call to leave a message or send a text if they preferred. We've just released a report and circulated a survey asking residents to provide names to determine finalists to find a name that accurately reflects the achievements and aspirations of an inclusive and diverse city. I tell you all of this today in the hopes of moving forward to address this sooner rather than later. We have established concretely that the neighbors are asking for this change. There's no need to delay the renaming process when our process has been robust, transparent, and inclusive. The work has been done at no cost to City Council by volunteers. It's taken hundreds of hours of volunteer work and donated time from experts at Connect the Dots. Symbols matter, and people have asked me personally why this is worth spending my time on. Isn't it a hassle? Don't we have bigger problems than symbols? Of course we have bigger problems. I'm not naive, but what we have done is built a coalition across neighborhoods from different socioeconomic backgrounds to find common ground on this issue. And that's not something that happens every day in this city or in any other. These relationships can be a crucial starting point for having the bigger discussions that we must undertake to get at the deeper roots of structural racism. On a final note related to the committee's purview, I would like to see the ball fields named after Roger Taney at FDR Park changed as quickly as possible and hope that renaming will be a priority for this commission. Thank you, and I'd be happy to discuss this further.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for all the work that has been put in by the community in which you live to really address this issue. Thank you very much. If we could have the next speaker on the witness list state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony. I believe that is Adam DePaul. Okay. Hi, Adam. Please state your name for the record and proceed.
Hey, Delawensi Adam Bimak DePaul. Dapi Takak Hak Teme Lenape Manishi Akata Tmike Ilang Mukik Donna Fan Boyle Ok Mabel Negrete Ok Erica Gould. My name is Adam Waterbear DePaul. I am here from the Lenape Nation of Pennsylvania, and I want to thank you for having me. And I also want to give a special welcome to my relations. We're not of the same nation, but our other Indigenous representatives here. Thank you all for coming. And I did not come here today with a prepared statement to read, but in listening to these goings on, I do have some things I'd like to say for the record. First of all, the initiative, I think, is wonderful. I like the idea of the committee. I like everything I'm hearing and seeing today. However, through both experience in creating these types of initiatives and in living in their wake, I'm yet entirely undecided whether this will be successful. And I think that will depend on some of the people here. It will definitely depend on how this is carried out. Councilwoman Cindy Brass, you said who is at the table will determine the effectiveness of this initiative. And I believe that is really the umbrella statement that will decide whether this initiative is successful or not. And I would add to that, who are you bringing to the table? And by bringing to the table, I don't mean just inviting to the table. It's wonderful that you have a change request form that will be made available to the public. But that's not bringing anyone to the table. That's just putting something out there in cyberspace that if somebody is lucky enough to come upon, they can react to. I think that this process of saying we will make this public driven is wonderful. I like the idea of being public driven, but I also think that this idea removes responsibility from the city and from the council to correct instances of racism that they have chosen to celebrate. And it puts that responsibility on the citizens. And I think that is problematic. Public driven sounds wonderful and initiatives should come from the public. But if the extent of that is going to say we're making available to the public opportunities to submit official forms for change, I don't think that's just public driven. I think that is, again, kind of pushing the responsibility onto the public to take the initiative to correct the city's mistakes. And I think the extent to which that is corrected will help determine the success of this overall project. I want to mirror Mabel Negrete's statement, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, her sentiment that there must be an Indigenous panel involved in this project. I don't know the makeup of the commission. I don't know if you have Native American representation there. I received this email, and I was very happy to. Contacting our nation was a wonderful first step in having Indigenous voices, and particularly the Indigenous voices on which the city of Philadelphia now rests, the Indigenous homeland of the Lenape. The invite was wonderful, but more needs to be done. There needs to be an active engagement and an active effort to bring us to the table. And that takes more than just making something available. It takes a active engagement, an active initiative to seek out and bring us to the table. Erica Gould said something I thought was wonderful. She said the voices to be listened to are the voices that are speaking now. And what I believe, what I took from when she said that is that it's we that are commenting, not necessarily the committee themselves, that have very strong voices that need to be heard here. And I would like to extend that sentiment a bit. I would like to go so far.
Well, Mr. DePaul?
Yes.
I'm going to ask if you can wrap up your comments, if you don't mind, only because we're going to lose our quorum to be able to vote out the bill from earlier today. So if you could begin to summarize your comments.
Well, I can't summarize my comments because I haven't gotten to half of them. But if time is up and I'm asked to be silent now, I'll briefly summarize what I've said so far. Our people, as well as African American communities and other marginalized communities, are not represented here today. I'm speaking as a person who has a leg in academia, who has worked for the Department of Parks and Recreation. The people who have spoken today are speaking as members of the political arena. Most of our nations, most of our people don't have that experience. They don't know how to negotiate political literacy. They don't know how to find the forms, how to fill them out. Many of us have been marginalized to the extent where we don't even have the education to understand which monuments we should be offended by. And I guess as I'm rushed here, I'll just have to leave it there. So in grand summary, reach out to us, engage us. Please take my comments with a grain of salt because I didn't get to say even half of what I wanted to say. So realize that my statements are incomplete. Thank you for inviting us, but please follow up and make this more than just an invite that's a motion of your goodwill. Make it a positive, active effort to bring us to the table so that this project can be successful.
Well, thank you very much for your comments, and I invite you to put them in writing, and we'll make sure that they are circulated to every member of the committee. So thank you very much for your comments today. I also want to acknowledge that we also do have written testimony from Faye M. Anderson, the director of All That Philly Jazz, and Rochelle Lee Snyder, who also spoke earlier, also provided written testimony, which has been provided to all members of the committee. So again, Mr. DePaul, if you want to submit your comments in writing, we will make sure that they are circulated. At this time, we are going to, unless there are any additional speakers, and seeing that there are none, we are going to go into our public meeting. There being no further questions from members of the committee and no further witnesses to testify, I'll ask again if there's anyone else present at this hearing whose name we have failed to call and that wishes to offer testimony on the bill or resolution being considered today. Hearing none, I want to thank all the panels and witnesses for their participation today. We value your opinions, and I now invite all panels and witnesses to please disconnect from the public meeting before we go into our public meeting. We will now pause the proceedings briefly as multiple participants leave the hearing. Okay, so if you testified earlier, we're asking you to disconnect from the call at this point. Thank you very much. This concludes the public hearing of the committee. We'll now go into a public meeting to consider the action to be taken on the bill before this committee today. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll to take attendance? Members that are in attendance will please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Also, please say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on screen when you speak. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Gauthier.
Present.
Councilmember Quinones Sanchez.
Present.
Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Thomas.
I'm present.
Councilmember Jones. Councilmember Brooks.
Okay, thank you. A quorum of the committee members are present, and this is the public meeting to report bill number 210360. I want to recognize Councilmember Gauthier for a motion on bill 210360.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that bill number 210360 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at our next session of council.
Second.
The chair notes for the record that Councilmember Isaiah Thomas seconds the motion. It's been moved and properly seconded that bill number 210360 be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation, and further move that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. All of those in favor of the motion will signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion carries. This concludes the business before the Committee on Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs today, and I want to thank you all very much for your attendance. Everyone have a great weekend, and please be safe. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Two.
Bye-bye.